know who this is for today, but somebody walked in here or clicked on this video with more questions than answers. You're trying to hold it together, but the storm is getting louder. The world is spinning, your soul is shaking. And if we're being honest, you've wondered, God, where are you? See, we're living in a time when people are checking out of faith because they think God checked out on them. Families are falling apart. Inflation is through the roof. Leaders are lying through their teeth. And the breaking news is breaking people's hope. Maybe you've prayed and didn't hear back. Maybe you've worshiped and still felt empty. Maybe you've been trying to stay strong, but truth be told, you feel forgotten, unheard, and unseen. But I came to interrupt your doubt and remind your soul of a truth that hell wants you to forget. God is there for you. Not just when you get the promotion, not just when the healing shows up, not just when the crowd is clapping. God is there in the storm. There comes a moment in every believer's life when the winds pick up, the skies turn dark, and what once felt like stable ground begins to tremble under your feet. That's when you realize you're in a storm. Not a sprinkle, not a drizzle, a full-blown, gut-punching, faith-testing storm. A storm that doesn't knock before it enters. It barges in, uninvited, unexplainable. And in those moments, we don't need cliche answers. We don't need cute slogans. We don't need fake smiles. What we need is presence. Not just a presence that comforts, but a presence that commands. A presence that still holds authority over the wind and waves. A presence that doesn't just pat you on the back and say, it'll be okay, but one that stands up in the middle of the chaos and says, peace, be still. We're not the first ones to face a storm, and we won't be the last. Let me take you to Mark chapter 4. Jesus tells his disciples, let us go to the other side. That alone should have been enough. If Jesus said they were going to the other side, then no storm had the authority to cancel that destination. But while crossing the sea, the storm hit. Water started filling the boat. Panic took over the crew. Experienced fishermen, grown men, began to cry out in fear. And where was Jesus? Asleep on a pillow. Now that's the kind of calm that confuses us. Because we often think that God should be panicking when we are. We think he should be shouting louder than the thunder and racing around fixing the situation. But Jesus was sleeping. Not because he didn't care, but because he was in control. Don't miss that. When heaven is silent, it doesn't mean heaven is absent. Jesus is still in the boat. When they woke him up, he didn't panic. He didn't strategize. He didn't even hold a prayer meeting. He stood up, rebuked the wind, and said, peace, be still. And immediately, the wind died down and the sea was calm. Church, that's the kind of authority we forget about in the middle of our own storm. When CNN is breaking news every hour, when the economy is trembling, when another shooting hits the headlines, and when your own house is going through hell, remember, the same voice that calmed the sea still speaks today. It may feel like the waves are winning. It may look like you're sinking. But if Jesus is in your boat, then you're safer in the storm with him than on land without him. And can I go even deeper? Sometimes God doesn't stop the storm around you until he calms the storm within you. Sometimes the bigger miracle isn't the water going still, it's your heart going still in the middle of chaos. Because peace isn't the absence of trouble, it's the presence of someone greater than trouble. That's why the disciples were shocked. They said, "Who is this that even the wind and waves obey him?" They had walked with Jesus. They had watched him heal. They had seen him teach. But this moment revealed a side of him they hadn't yet experienced. See, storms have a way of revealing Christ in dimensions we wouldn't otherwise know. If you never face a storm, you'll never know the one who commands them. If you never feel out of control, you'll never know the one who is fully in control. If life always makes sense, you'll never meet the one who brings purpose out of confusion. So don't despise the storm. Don't curse the clouds. Because while you're panicking, God is proving himself faithful. He's showing you that even in the winds of change, in the floods of grief, in the lightning strikes of disappointment, he is there. And he's not pacing the floor of heaven in worry. He's resting. Why? Because he's already written the end of the story. That storm is not your end. That storm is your setup for a new revelation of the God who is not just with you, but for you and over everything trying to sink you. And if the storm didn't take you out yet, then it's proof that his hand is still on you. God is there in the fire. Now let's talk about the fire. Not just physical fire, but the kind of trial that burns deep. The kind of furnace you get thrown into without warning. The fire of betrayal, the fire of heartbreak, the fire of injustice, the fire of depression, the fire of loss. It's the place where life doesn't make sense, where faith feels like it's melting under the heat of reality, where prayers feel unanswered and worship feels weak. The fire isn't just hot, it's humbling. It strips away pride. It exposes motives. It tests your theology. It reveals what you really believe when comfort is no longer present. And that's exactly where the enemy wants you. Questioning your God, doubting his goodness, and wondering if you've been forgotten. But let me walk you back to the book of Daniel. 3 young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refused to bow to the idol of the culture. In a time when bowing meant survival, standing meant fire, and they chose to stand. The king gave them a second chance. He said, when you hear the music, just bow like everybody else. But they said, we don't need another chance. Our God is able to deliver us, and even if he doesn't, we still won't bow. Now that's boldness birthed from conviction. And that's the kind of faith that threatens darkness. Faith that trusts God, not just for what he can do, but trusts him even if he doesn't do it. So they were thrown in the furnace. The fire was turned up 7 times hotter. The guards who threw them in were consumed instantly. But when the king looked in, he jumped back and asked, didn't we throw 3 men into the fire? His advisors nodded. But the king said, I see 4 men walking around, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like the Son of God. That 4th man was the pre-incarnate Christ. He didn't send an angel. He didn't watch from heaven. He stepped into the fire himself. And here's what you need to know. God may not prevent the fire, but he always joins you in it. And not only that, when they came out, they weren't burned. Their clothes weren't scorched. A smell of smoke was on them, but what was burned? The ropes. The very things that had bound them. That's what fire does under the control of God. It burns off what had you tied up and leaves you more free than when you went in. The fire that was meant to kill them became the platform for God's glory. Because when God walks with you in the fire, he doesn't just preserve you, he promotes you. They were elevated right after that moment. So don't mistake the furnace for failure. It might just be your proving ground. The fire will come. Life will heat up. The culture will try to make you bow. And sometimes God will let you be thrown into the heat, but not to punish you, to refine you. Because the fire doesn't destroy the gold, it reveals it. And while others are watching to see you fall apart, they'll witness you walk out testifying not about the pain, but about the one who walked with you when it should have been over. And as the smoke clears, you won't just say, God helped me. You'll say, God was there. God is there in the silence. There's a silence that comes into your life, not just when people leave, not just when friends stop calling, but when heaven itself seems quiet. The kind of silence where you're praying, but all you hear is your own voice echoing off the walls. The kind of silence where you've fasted, cried, sought, but there's no word, no whisper, no sign. And this silence isn't new. Elijah faced it when the earthquake, wind and fire passed by, and there was no God in them. Only in the still small voice did the presence show up. And sometimes God doesn't speak in the thunder because he's testing if you can recognize him in the whisper. The whisper doesn't mean weakness. The whisper doesn't mean absence. The whisper often means he's closer than ever. Because people don't whisper from far away. They whisper when they're near. The silence of God is a crucible where the gold of trust is refined. It's the space between what he promised and when it comes to pass. It's the hallway between prayer and provision. And most believers don't get derailed by the warfare, they get disoriented by the silence. Because silence forces you to deal with what you really believe. When God spoke to you, it was easy to shout. When the prophecy came, you danced. When the blessing flowed, your faith soared. But when the answers pause, when the heavens go mute, when you show up to church hoping for a breakthrough and all you get is stillness, then what? Do you stop pressing in? Do you stop serving? Or do you remember that the same God who spoke in the past hasn't gone anywhere? Jesus knew this silence. On the cross he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? That was not a cry of disbelief. That was raw honesty in divine pain. And in that moment, God was silent, not because he had left, but because the plan was in motion. Heaven wasn't absent, it was fulfilling its greatest purpose through the quiet. And so many of us are in that place where what God said doesn't match what you see. Where what you feel doesn't affirm what you know. But even in that, he is there. He is watching your posture, not just your praise. Because praise is easy when the miracle comes. But worship in the silence, that moves heaven. That shows maturity. That builds something deep in you that shouting alone can't build. Look at Job. When his world fell apart, his children died, his health failed, his friends turned religious, and his wife told him to curse God and die, Job sat in the ashes. But what did he say? Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. That's faith in silence. That's devotion when there's no delivery. That's love that doesn't depend on circumstances. Because trust is most visible when there's no visible sign to trust in. When you say amen without an answer. When you keep tithing without the breakthrough. When you worship. And all heaven does is watch. God's silence is not rejection, it's refinement. It's not punishment, it's preparation. Sometimes he's working behind the scenes. Other times he's testing if your love for him is based on his voice or based on who he is. You see, babies need constant reassurance, but soldiers need orders. And sometimes the last order is enough. And when God has spoken a word, he doesn't need to repeat himself just because we're insecure. He expects us to stand on what he already said. Because the silence is sacred space. It's where we grow. It's where we stretch. It's where we become people of rooted, unshakable faith. And once you've walked through that silence, once you've stood your ground when the heavens didn't open, you come out with something unbreakable. God is there when you fall. There are moments in your journey with God that you don't want to talk about. The kind that don't make the testimony circle. The kind that don't look good on social media. The kind that remind you that you're still human. I'm talking about the fall. When you said you'd never go back, but you did. When you swore you were stronger than that, but you weren't. When the flesh won. When the pressure broke you. When the secret sin you thought was dead resurfaced. When the flesh won. When the pressure broke you. When the secret sin you thought was dead resurfaced. It's in those moments that shame tries to move in like a permanent tenant. Guilt whispers you're not worthy. And the enemy starts preaching the sermon that says, see, you're no different than the rest. But even in your fall, God is there. God was there when Peter denied him. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. After pledging his loyalty, after walking on water, after witnessing miracles, Peter still fell. But when Jesus rose from the dead, the angel said, go tell the disciples and Peter. Why name Peter specifically? Because heaven knew Peter was probably disqualifying himself. He was probably thinking, God's done with me. But God was saying, I'm not finished. And that's the heart of the Father. He doesn't write you off when you fall. He writes restoration plans. He doesn't tear down your identity. He reminds you of who you are. David fell with Bathsheba, a man after God's own heart, committed adultery and murder. Yet when he repented, God still used him. He still wrote Psalms. He still walked in purpose. Because God never uses perfect people. He uses purified hearts. And purification doesn't happen in perfection. It happens in brokenness. That's why he says, a broken and contrite heart I will not despise. God is not afraid of your mess. He's not allergic to your failure. He's not intimidated by your dark night of the soul. He steps into the middle of it and says, where are your accusers? Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. He covers you, not to excuse you, but to restore you. The problem is, we often think falling means finishing. But in the kingdom, Falling is sometimes the doorway to real transformation, because it's in the broken place that you meet grace on a level rules never showed you. It's in the fallout that you find the embrace of a father who doesn't throw stones, but opens his arms. And when you know what it's like to fall and be caught, to mess up, and still, you love, you stop judging other people's journey. You start walking in humility. You realize that your position in the kingdom was never about performance. It was always about grace. Grace that reaches lower than your lowest point. Even in the New Testament, we see restoration after failure over and over again. Mark deserted Paul, but later Paul asked for him back, saying, he is useful to me. That's redemption. That's what God does. He rewrites the narrative. He doesn't hide the scars. He uses them as stories, because someone needs to know you can fall and still be found. You can stumble and still be sent. You can fail and still finish strong. That's the gospel. Not that we never fall, but that when we do, his hand is already there, reaching down, pulling us back up, setting our feet on solid ground. Once again, God is there in global chaos. Right now, the world feels like it's unraveling. Nations at war, economies unstable, leaders compromising truth for power. People are wondering where God is when governments collapse and injustice rises. But even in chaos, his throne isn't shaking. He rules above presidents and kings, and his plans are never interrupted by breaking news. From ancient Babylon to modern America, God has always worked through confusion to accomplish his will. What looks like collapse is often construction in disguise. He's not pacing heaven in worry. He's positioning his people for something greater. The shaking is real, but so is his sovereignty. God is there for the forgotten. You may feel invisible, overlooked by people, underestimated by the world, but God never misses a moment of your life. When others walk past, he stops. When others silence your pain, he listens. In a crowd, he sees the one. Just like Hagar in the wilderness, he comes to the broken, the abandoned, the misused, and calls himself El Roy, the God who sees. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. He saw you cry yourself to sleep. He saw the moment you almost gave up. And he's already writing a comeback. The world isn't ready, for God is there for the next generation. There's a war over this generation's identity, a battle for their minds through screens, lies, and distractions. While culture feeds them confusion, God is still calling them chosen. He's raising up Davids in secret fields, Esthers in broken systems, Josiahs in corrupted times. While the world says they're lost, God says they're his. And Josiahs. There's a prophet. God says they're his. He doesn't look at their TikTok feed. He looks at their potential. He's anointing a generation not afraid to stand, not ashamed to worship, not bound by culture's labels, and even in the noise, he's whispering their name. Awakening purpose, igniting fire that systems can't extinguish. God is there in the purpose you can't see. There are seasons where nothing makes sense, where your prayers feel blocked, your vision feels foggy, and you question why you're even here. But even when purpose hides, God is working. Joseph couldn't see the throne from the pit, yet purpose didn't stop moving. Delay isn't denial, it's development. God uses obscurity to form clarity. He allows the waiting to test the weight of your calling. You're not lost. You're being led through what you don't understand into what you're called to become. He's not building your comfort. He's building your character for something you can't yet name. God is there. Beyond religion, God was never confined to stained glass windows or Sunday services. He doesn't live in man-made boxes. He walks into broken spaces. He's not just found in a church building. He's in your bedroom when you cry, in your car when you scream, in your silence when you can't even pray. Religion gives rules, but relationship gives access. The woman at the well met God outside the temple, in the middle of her. God met Moses in the wilderness, Paul on a road, and meets you wherever faith dares to breathe. You don't have to climb to him. He comes where you are. God is there until the end. From the first breath in the womb to the final heartbeat on this earth, God's presence surrounds every moment. When people walk away, when strength fades, when the finish line feels fall, he stays. He was there in the beginning and he'll be there when the curtain closes. When friends forget, he remembers. When the crowd gets quiet, he still speaks. Even in death, he doesn't disappear. He escorts his children home. Nothing in life or death can separate you from his love, because his faithfulness is not seasonal and his commitment isn't conditional. Let me close this moment by stitching together the fabric of everything God has been saying throughout this message. Whether you're in a storm or walking through fire, whether heaven feels silent or you've fallen flat on your face, God is there. Not hypothetically, not occasionally, not religiously, but faithfully, constantly, personally. He's there when global headlines scream chaos, when nations tremble, and when the systems fail. He's still king. He's there when you feel like no one knows your name, when you've been left behind or written off. He hasn't turned his eyes from you once. And oh, he hasn't forgotten the next generation. He's marking young hearts with a fire this culture can't extinguish. He's raising up leaders out of those who've been overlooked. And even when purpose feels invisible, he's behind the curtain, orchestrating something eternal with every thread of your life. You don't have to wear a robe, sit in a pew, or speak in Hebrew for God to show up. He's in your living room, in your hospital room, in your prison cell, in your school hallway, in your depression, in your late night questions, in your loneliness. From the womb to the tomb, from your worst moment to your highest calling, from the first failure to the last breath, he is there. He never needed your perfection. He wanted your surrender. So stop trying to earn what he already gave. Stop trying to fix what he's already forgiven. And walk boldly knowing that the God who walks on water, who shuts the mouths of lions, who brings dead things back to life, is walking right with you right now. So go ahead and breathe again. Lift your head. Straighten your back. You are not alone. God is there for you, and he's not leaving. That's not a feeling, that's a fact. Walk in it, live in it, and never forget it.